Welcome. Tonight, you're invited to leave behind the modern world. Let the soft hum of traffic, the buzz of bright screens, and the demands of daily life begin to melt away. Instead, imagine a different rhythm, older, slower, more distant. A world shaped not by steel and electricity, but by earth, fire, and the slow movement of human hands across centuries. You're going to drift through time to an age when bronze was the cutting edge of innovation, when homes were made of sun-dried mud, when grain was ground by hand, and when every meal depended on your own labor and luck. This is not the history of kings and battles, not yet. This is the quiet, difficult, and sometimes beautiful story of the people who lived in Bronze Age villages, who woke before sunrise, who scraped at the soil for barley, who shaped pots and baked bread and lived by the rhythm of seasons. And through the long hours of this journey, we'll also meet a forgotten empire in its final days, unravel ancient writing no one alive can read, and peer into the lives of noblewomen who wore gold and perfumed their hair with oil. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine you wake before dawn. Not because of an alarm clock, but because the thatched roof above you is leaking again. A slow drip, steady and insistent, falls onto the corner of your blanket, if you're lucky enough to have one. The air is cool, carrying the smell of damp straw, wood smoke, and animals, always animals. You share this small home with more than just your family. Chickens sometimes roost in the rafters. Goats bleat softly behind the partition of woven reeds. The floor beneath you is hard-packed dirt. A clay hearth in the center of the room has gone cold overnight, though it still holds the scent of last evening's fire, a mix of ash, burnt barley, and charred wild herbs. There is no time to linger. The sun hasn't risen, but work begins now. The grindstone waits. You kneel beside it, as your mother did, and her mother before her. You press the rough handstone into the pile of dried barley and begin the circular motion, slow, repetitive, unyielding. This is not quick work. It takes an hour just to make enough flour for a small flatbread. Your arms ache by the time you're done, but there's still firewood to collect, goats to lead to grazing, water to fetch. The path to the water source is not short. It winds past the outer huts of the village, where smoke rises in narrow trails from morning fires. The path is worn smooth by generations of feet bare or in simple leather sandals, softened by dust in the dry months, slick with mud when it rains. The water, when you reach it, is not clear, but it is all there is. You fill clay jugs and balance them carefully, the weight pressing into your shoulders as you return, your fingers already sore. You don't think of this as hardship. This is just life. The rhythm of your world is one of constant effort. No part of it is truly easy. Even the simplest tasks require time, strength, and patience. Your clothing is simple coarse linen or wool, scratchy against the skin. Everything is handmade, patched, and worn by many. Your hands, too, are rough. There is no such thing as free time, only the rare pause between tasks when you might sit, share a story, or eat something small. There are moments of beauty, of course, in the way the sun slants across the fields in the late afternoon, in the laughter of a neighbor when someone spills grain and curses the gods under their breath, in the smell of baking bread from the hearths as dusk approaches. But you are always tired. And then there is the sickness. It moves through the village in waves, coughing, fevers, things without names. There are no doctors. Only healers who use herbs and smoke and whispered charms. Sometimes they work. Sometimes they don't. The night offers no electricity, no warm bath, no soft bed. Only a straw mattress, if you're lucky, and the creaking of the roof above you. You lie down, muscles sore, back bent from hours of bending and lifting. Outside, an owl calls. Somewhere in the dark, something moves in the underbrush. But you are too tired to care. And tomorrow, it will begin again. As you drift away from the dust and labor of a Bronze Age village, the rhythm of stone tools and morning fire gives way to the quieter thrum of distant diplomacy, shifting alliances, and the final twilight of an ancient empire. Far to the east of the Mediterranean, in the highlands of what is now central Turkey, stood the capital of an empire, the city of Hattusa. Carved into the rock and encircled by massive stone walls, Hattusa was the heart of the Hittite world. At its height, the Hittite Empire controlled a vast swath of territory, stretching from the Aegean Sea to the edges of Mesopotamia. It rivaled Egypt, corresponded with Babylon, and warred with the kingdom of Mitanni. But tonight, we will not recount a grand battle. Instead, we will explore the slow unraveling of a mighty power, not with swords and cries, but through silence, empty granaries, and cities that gradually faded from memory. The fall of the Hittite Empire wasn't sudden. It was more like the turning of a season subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Imagine yourself as a scribe in Hattusa, perhaps in the reign of the last known king, Suppiluliuma II. You work in a quiet corner of the palace, surrounded by clay tablets, sealed jars of ink, and the scent of warm dust. The palace still holds echoes of former glory-decorated courtyards, stone lions guarding the gates, tablets covered in cuneiform script from foreign kings and merchants. But the halls are quieter now. Trade routes that once brought copper and tin, the lifeblood of bronze, have begun to falter. Caravans are fewer. Roads once busy with wagons now echo only with wind. Supplies dwindle. Storehouses are no longer full. In some regions, there is famine. In others, strange faces arrive migrants, refugees, perhaps even raiders. Along the coasts, the Sea Peoples, mysterious groups whose origins we still do not fully understand, appear in increasing numbers. Not armies, not quite pirates, but something more elusive. Their ships are carved in foreign shapes, their tactics unfamiliar. They come ashore and disappear again, leaving fire in their wake. Diplomatic messages still arrive from Egypt, though they are more polite than sincere. The pharaoh speaks of shared history, of ancient treaties, and long-standing respect, but he offers no help. He has his own troubles. And then there is the unrest at home. Local governors and vassal kings begin to act independently. Tribute is no longer delivered with the same punctuality. In distant provinces, the Hittite banner no longer flies. There is rebellion in the air, though no one dares to say it aloud. There are still meetings in the palace, councils of elders, generals, merchants, priests. They speak in calm voices of strategies and reforms. They prepare for the harvest, revise supply lists, discuss military readiness. But beneath their words is a shared knowledge, an unspoken awareness that the world they inherited is coming undone. Outside the city walls, the forests grow thicker. The roads crack and crumble. Temples that once held offerings now stand quiet. The gods are still worshipped, but there is a new kind of prayer, more desperate, more pleading. Eventually, the record goes dark. The clay tablets stop. The archives end mid-thought. There is no climactic final battle, no glorious last stand inscribed on stone. Just silence. Archaeologists will uncover the ruins centuries later. Massive stone gates, inscribed walls, remnants of a great civilization. But no eyewitness to the final days will ever tell their story in full. They simply faded. And so the Hittite Empire passed into memory, not with a bang, but with the gentle, slow crumbling of an order that had lasted centuries. From this fading power, we now turn. Picture yourself walking along a sun-drenched hillside above the Aegean Sea. The air is still, heavy with the scent of dry herbs, thyme, wild fennel, a trace of salt from the shore far below. Scattered stone walls snake across the landscape, the remains of buildings long since reduced to ruins. You're standing on the island of Crete, and beneath your feet hidden, under layers of soil and centuries, lie the whispers of a civilization both brilliant and elusive, the Minoans. The Minoan civilization flourished during the Bronze Age, long before the rise of classical Greece. They built grand palaces, elaborate frescoes, and an expansive maritime network. They traded with Egypt and Mesopotamia. Their homes were complex and surprisingly modern, with running water, light wells, and painted walls. But they also left behind something more enigmatic, a writing system that to this day we cannot read. It's called Linear A, discovered on clay tablets, pottery shards, and even ceremonial objects. Linear A is a script made up of angular symbols, lines, loops, and dots, pressed into soft clay and baked by time. It was likely used to keep records, perhaps inventory, religious rituals, or trade logs. But no one living today knows exactly what those symbols mean. You might imagine yourself as an ancient scribe sitting in the shaded corner of a Minoan storeroom. The walls are cool, thick with clay and limestone, designed to keep the heat out. Amphorae of oil and grain stand in rows around you. Before you lies a slab of wet clay and a reed stylus. With practiced precision, you mark each symbol. You don't pause to admire the beauty of the script. It's a tool, a part of your daily work. Perhaps you're recording the amount of olive oil sent to the palace kitchens, or the names of priests assigned to tomorrow's festival. You don't know that 3,000 years later, people will stare at your symbols, puzzled and curious, trying to decipher the meaning behind them. Linear A has resisted all attempts at translation. It appears to be related to another script, Linear B, which was used by the later Mycenaean Greeks. Linear B was cracked in the 1950s and revealed itself to be an early form of Greek. But Linear A is different. It seems to represent a language unlike any we know. Not Greek, not Indo-European, something older, something that may have vanished entirely. Even now, scholars pore over every tablet and inscription, comparing symbols, counting frequencies, mapping patterns. They try to match it with known languages, with phonetics, with anything that might unlock its code. But the key remains missing. The symbols are strangely rhythmic, almost musical in their arrangement. A few have guessed at meanings words for grain, for wine, for gods. But these are guesses only. The rest remains a whisper in the dark. And so, Linear A has become one of the most beguiling puzzles of the ancient world. A language frozen in clay, just out of reach. A message from a culture that danced, built palaces, worshipped bull-headed deities, and then vanished. Their frescoes remain bright blues and ochres, dolphins and lily and women in flounced skirts. Their pottery, delicate and patterned, their ruins half swallowed by time, but their words still sleeping. And perhaps that's what makes Linear A so captivating. It is both. Let us return to the world of the known, to a life not of grinding grain or patching rooftops, but of luxury at least, by the standards of the Bronze Age. Let us walk slowly into the palace halls of Mycenae, and step quietly into the life of a noblewoman. The morning light spills through narrow windows high on the stone walls of a private chamber. The air inside is warm, heavy with the scent of olive oil and crushed herbs. Somewhere in the distance, sandalwood incense curls in the corner of the room, clinging gently to the cool stone. You are not a farmer. You are not a servant. You are one of the privileged few born into wealth, raised within palace walls. Your clothing is soft, not coarse wool or scratchy linen, but finely spun cloth dyed in rich earth tones. You wear multiple layers, a long flowing robe that ties at the waist, decorated with intricate patterns. Around your wrists are bracelets of bronze or even gold, if your family has wealth enough. A pendant of carved stone rests on your chest, perhaps a family heirloom, perhaps a protective symbol blessed by the temple priestesses. Before the day begins in earnest, you sit with your attendants. They comb your hair dark, heavy, and oiled to a glossy sheen. It's pulled back with delicate pins and ivory combs, twisted into loops or braids that reflect your status. There is no mirror as we know it. Instead, a polished disc of bronze is held before you, imperfect, slightly warped, yet enough to see the outline of your own face, softened by time and tradition. The palace is alive with quiet motion. Servants move in sandals across tiled floors. Courtyards are swept clean with bundles of rushes. Distantly, you hear the rhythmic beat of a loom women weaving long strips of cloth in a side hall. Their voices low, their motions practiced and steady. Your world is not idle, but it is carefully structured. You may oversee the household stores, olive oil, wine, grain, honey, and ensure that offerings are prepared for the household gods. You might be summoned to the courtyard shrine, where libations are poured onto smooth stone and prayers are whispered in the old language. Marriage is a certainty. Your union, likely arranged, ties your family to another noble house. You may not choose your husband, but once married, you will have a domain of your own. Rooms, servants, children, each bringing new roles, new responsibilities. And yet, there is leisure too. You walk the shaded colonnades, pausing to admire painted frescoes, scenes of chariots, dolphins, women gathering saffron. You sip wine diluted with water from a small clay cup, cool to the touch. You may hear music played on a lyre or flute, soft, airy melodies that drift through the pillared halls. In the evenings, your world grows quieter. Oil lamps are lit. The flames flicker against the stone walls. You sit in silence, perhaps with your daughters, perhaps with an old friend, watching the shadows dance as night descends. There is a sense of ritual to everything. Bathing, dressing, speaking, walking. Each action is deliberate, taught, expected. But beneath the surface of this order, there is also the unknown. Letters arrive on clay tablets, marked with linear B, spoken only by scribes and read only by the most educated. You hear talk of distant wars, of shifting alliances, of Mycenaean kings who challenge one another's power. You may never see these things directly, but their ripples touch your world all the same. A cousin called to serve in the palace guard. A change in the color of cloth sent from trade routes. A whisper from a priestess during a festival. Still, your world endures, structured, ornate, rich in form and tradition. The scent of beeswax, the chill of polished floors, the hush of palace rooms just after dusk. A noblewoman of Mycenae did not labor in the fields. Her hands were not calloused from the plow, but her days were no less shaped by the rhythm. Now, let the polished floors and perfumed air of the palace slip away. You find yourself standing in a smaller space. The ceiling is low. The walls are rough wattle and daub, or thick sun-baked clay, depending on the region. The only window is a slit in the wall, letting in a faint shaft of light and the occasional breeze that carries with it the scent of herbs, wood smoke, and soil. This is the kitchen of a Bronze Age home, but not a kitchen as we might recognize it. There is no gleaming metal, no steel knives, no iron stoves. Even the bronze that gives the age its name is rare and precious, far too valuable to waste on cooking utensils. Instead, the tools here are humble. Simple pottery, bone, stone, and wood. The hearth is the heart of the room, an open fire pit lined with stone or clay. Above it, a clay vessel rests on a tripod of rocks, blackened with soot. The fire crackles softly, burning dried brush and animal dung. The smoke curls upward and hangs in the air for a long time before finally slipping out through the thatch. Here, meals begin with grain, always grain. Barley or emmer wheat stored in baskets or clay jars. The grain is poured onto a flat stone and crushed with a handstone, just as you did in the early hours of the day. The rhythm is familiar. Circular, slow, steady. Once ground into coarse flour, it's mixed with water, maybe a little salt if available, and formed into flat rounds. These cakes of dough are cooked on hot stones or inside the ashes of the fire. There is no leavening, no oven, no fluffy loaf. Just dense, warm bread, slightly smoky, sometimes burnt at the edges. There is no cutlery. The food is eaten with fingers or dipped with small clay spoons. Hands are washed with cold water from a jug before and after meals ritual as much as necessity. Other ingredients come and go with the seasons. Lentils, chickpeas, wild onions, and garlic. Perhaps a few dried fruits, figs or dates if trade has been good. Occasionally, dried herbs are tossed in thyme, mint, coriander. Their aroma fills the little room. If the family is fortunate, they might have some goat's milk to boil down into a soft cheese. If they are even luckier, a piece of fish or meat. Though such things are rare, often saved for feasts or religious offerings. Water for boiling is carefully poured into clay pots, balanced over stones. The clay must be well made, not too porous, or it will crack. The potter's skill is the silent foundation of every meal. Food is stored with care. Dried in the sun, buried in cool pits, sealed in beeswax. Spoilage is constant, ever lurking. One mistake in storage could cost a family their winter supply. There is little waste. Bones are boiled to flavor thin stews. Ashes are used for cleaning. Leftover grain is fed to animals. Everything has a purpose. Everything must be stretched as far as it can go. The smells of the kitchen linger on the walls. Smoke, onions, damp earth. It's not unpleasant. It's simply the scent of life carried on from day to day, season to season. There is no rush. Cooking takes time. Hours pass between kindling the first flame and sitting down to eat. But there is rhythm, a slow, ancient cadence to preparing food by firelight, to stirring with a wooden spoon, to tasting the edge of a barley cake still hot from the stone. Evening comes. The hearth glows red in the gathering dark. Someone hums a low tune. Outside, the night settles across the village, and inside, the family gathers close, sharing warmth and the fruits of a long day's labor. It is simple, it is fragile, and it is everything. Now let the fire fade to embers and step outside into the crisp evening. The stars have begun to rise, and now, under their silent gaze, we walk out beyond the edge of the village, to the hills where the flocks sleep and where one figure stands watch alone, quiet and steady. The shepherd. In the Bronze Age world, livestock was not simply a source of food or clothing. It was wealth, power, prestige. To own herds of sheep or goats, or even a few cattle, was to possess status, to gain favor, to offer tribute. In the palaces of kings, herds were counted and taxed. Tallied on clay tablets, every animal recorded with a symbol, a mark, a number, and someone had to watch over them. You are that someone. Your life is not spent within the walls of a town, but among the grasses and slopes of the open land. The rhythm of your day and your night is set not by clock or calendar, but by the grazing cycle of the animals under your care. You rise early, before the sky begins to lighten. The goats are restless, bleating softly in the pen. You check each one, looking for illness or injury. The wooden gate creaks open, and the herd spills out, hooves clattering over stone and dry earth. You lead them to pasture, a patch of scrubland or sparse hillside, where rough grasses grow among the rocks. The wind is steady, the ground uneven. You carry a staff, not for show, but for defense against predators, against strays, against the unpredictable moments that arise in open country. Your tunic is simple, coarse wool patched many times. Your feet are wrapped in leather thongs. Around your waist, a pouch holds essentials, a flint blade, a sliver of cheese, maybe a small carved charm. You walk, and you wait. Sundays are quiet. The animals graze. The sun moves slowly across the sky. You might hum softly or carve a bit of wood as you sit on a stone, your eyes never fully leaving the herd. Other days are more uncertain, a sudden rustle in the brush. A lamb goes missing, a storm rolls over the hills. The animals panic. You call out not loudly, but with practiced authority. They know your voice. They follow it. Your mind is always half-focused watching the land, the herd, the shadows. But you also think of home, of hunger, of the stories passed down around the fire. You remember tales of wolves, of spirits in the hills, of shepherds who vanished and were never found. When dusk comes, you lead the animals back, slowly, steadily, each one counted, each one herded through the gate. You lock the pen and sit by the fire, eating bread from your pouch, sipping water from a gourd. And at night, when others sleep indoors, you lie on a blanket near the animals, with only the stars above you. The chill of the air seeps into your bones. You wrap yourself tighter and listen for the sounds of hooves, of breathing, of silence breaking. You are alone, but not lonely. This is your world. It is hard, but it is simple. And that simplicity is its own kind of peace. In the distance, in palaces and temples, the kings and nobles count their flocks on clay tablets. But out here, on the hillside, you are the one who guards that wealth. You, with your walking stick and leather sandals, with your tired feet and patient eyes. And tomorrow, it will begin again. Now, let us leave this quiet figure by the fire and trace the great invisible web of trade routes that wove these far-off lives together, roots of tin and copper, of stone and story, of movement across an ancient world. Now, let us lift ourselves gently above the hills and herds, above the sleeping villages and dim hearth fires, and drift across the ancient landscape, following the invisible paths carved by centuries of footsteps, hooves, and ox carts. The Bronze Age was not a world of isolation. Though kingdoms rose and fell, though farmers knew little beyond their valleys, the great arteries of trade connected them all, slow-moving but vital. And at the heart of those networks, two metals held everything together: copper and tin. To make bronze, the very material that defined this era, you needed both. Copper was more common, found in Cyprus, Anatolia, even parts of Central Europe. But tin was rare. Tin had to travel, often from faraway places, possibly even as distant as modern-day Afghanistan or the mountains of Cornwall in Britain. And to get it from mine to market, traders embarked on long, treacherous journeys. Imagine yourself not as a farmer, not a shepherd, but a trader. Your life is on the move. You rise before dawn in a small caravanserai, a kind of traveler's rest station, little more than a square courtyard surrounded by mud brick rooms. Your animals are packed, donkeys or oxen, each laden with sacks and amphorae. You carry not just tin, but other goods too: lapis lazuli, shell, obsidian, woven cloth, dried figs. The road ahead is long. Perhaps you travel west through Anatolia, across narrow mountain passes and dusty valleys. Or perhaps you follow the Euphrates northward, hugging the river's edge where the reeds grow tall and wild animals lurk. The journey is not easy. There are no paved highways. The terrain is rough, the paths unreliable. Bandits watch from high ground. Some days bring sandstorms or floods. Others bring the quiet dread of seeing smoke on the horizon, evidence that another caravan may have been ambushed. And yet you press on. At night, you rest in way stations or simple roadside camps. A fire is lit, pots are set to boil, and the animals are tethered in a circle for safety. Around the fire, low voices speak many tongues: Akkadian, Hittite, Hurrian, and languages now long lost. You trade news as much as goods. Who's at war? Who's paid tribute? Which roads are no longer safe? Sometimes you cross into foreign kingdoms where the customs are unfamiliar. You present tablets or carved tokens as credentials, early passports of clay or sealstone. You bow before local governors, offering gifts to secure passage. The cities along these routes, like Ugarit, Mari, and Byblos, are bustling with languages, colors, and smells you've never known before. And always, the tin moves with you, heavy, dull, precious. The risks are constant. One broken wheel, one sick animal, one wrong turn, and your cargo and your life could be lost. But success means survival, even wealth. Tin will be turned into bronze, and bronze into weapons, tools, statues, temple fittings. What began as a quiet chunk of stone in a distant mountain will end its journey as a gleaming blade on the hip of a palace guard, or as a ritual vessel in the hands of a high priest. Over time, these trade routes become more than roads. They become veins through which culture flows. alongside tin and copper travel stories, songs, deities, and designs. A shape of pottery made in Syria appears in a Cypriot home. A goddess worshipped in Anatolia is invoked in a shrine far to the west. But there is fear too. These routes, for all their promise, are also paths for destruction. Armies follow them. Refugees spill along them. Raiders learn them. As the Bronze Age begins to darken, many of these same paths will carry chaos. But not now. The road fades behind us, and we step softly into stillness, a place apart from the living world, a burial ground, quiet, sacred, layered with centuries of memory and custom. Here in the highlands of ancient Anatolia, modern-day Turkey people of the Bronze Age held deep, complex beliefs about death. Death was not simply an ending, but a transition, a passage to another realm, a journey for which one needed preparation, offerings, and guidance. The burial sites we find today tell part of this story. Scattered across hillsides, often not far from settlements, these graves are marked by mounds of earth or hidden beneath flat stones. Some are simple pits, others are stone-lined chambers. A few are collective tombs, reused again and again over generations. But all speak of care, of intention, of a desire to tend to the dead, even in a time when survival left little room for luxury. Imagine yourself as a mourner in a small Bronze Age community. Someone has died, perhaps an elder, perhaps a child. The air is heavy with smoke from a low fire. Relatives gather, their voices hushed. The body is washed carefully with water and herbs. Hair is combed. Wrappings of cloth are tied with knots thought to carry protective power. The deceased is not buried empty-handed. Small grave goods are placed alongside them, a cup of wine or barley beer, a carved figurine, a favorite necklace, a flint blade, perhaps still bearing signs of long use. These objects are not wealth for wealth's sake. They are token symbols of identity or offerings for the world beyond. In some regions, bodies were buried in a fetal position, knees drawn up, arms tucked close as if curled in sleep or in return to the womb of the earth. In others, cremation became more common, the ashes placed in jars or urns, sealed and buried beneath the floor of the home. Sometimes the tombs were reopened, bones rearranged. Older remains moved to make space for new burials. There is no single, simple custom-only patterns shaped by region, tribe, and time. Above the grave, rituals unfold. Songs, perhaps, or spoken laments. Maybe even food is shared, bread and beer consumed by the mourners in quiet communion. Later, offerings may be placed at the site, libations poured, fires lit on anniversaries. The landscape itself becomes sacred. Some hills are dotted with hundreds of small burials. Others hold monumental tombs with carved stones and elaborate chambers for a single individual. There is no written account of what these people believed about the afterlife. No text survives to tell us what they thought happened next. But the care they showed tells its own story. They imagined something beyond. They feared forgetting, perhaps, or hoped for reunion, or simply wanted the dead to rest in peace, without want or wandering. Even in times of war or famine, the dead were buried with dignity. Even the poorest graves show signs of intention. The placement of a jar, a handful of ochre, a smooth stone tucked beside the hand. And when archaeologists uncover these graves today, they do so slowly, gently, with brushes and trowels and quiet hands. Because each grave is not just a skeleton, but a silence. A life once lived in full now paused, preserved, and returned to the earth. As we leave these burial grounds behind, we return to the world of the living, but not to the common folk. Instead, we will now walk the corridors of authority and meet the men who ruled these lands not with swords, but with signs, seals, and clay. Now, we follow the winding river eastward, along the banks of the Euphrates, where reeds whisper in the wind, and the sun bakes the mud-brick walls to a deep golden hue. Here, in the Bronze Age city of Mari, the story changes once more. This was not a village, not a pasture or a workshop. This was an organized city of corridors, courtyards, and administration, one of the many shining centers of Bronze Age Mesopotamia. And within its palace, deeper than the public courtyards and the king's throne room, sat the quiet power behind the throne, the scribes. These men, often trained from childhood, were the bureaucrats of the Bronze Age, not warriors, not nobles, but elite in a different way through literacy. To write was rare, to read rarer still, and to manage the flow of words, numbers, goods, people, tribute, law, and ritual that was power in its most precise form. You can imagine the scribe's room, small, dimly lit, the walls lined with clay tablets, some still drying, others neatly stacked. A reed stylus rests beside a shallow bowl of water. There is no ink, no paper. Instead, knowledge is pressed into wet clay with practiced hands, each wedge-shaped mark part of the cuneiform system. Read not letter by letter, but symbol by symbol. A typical day might begin with copying royal decrees. Later, recording inventory from temple offerings, dates, barley, sheep. Still later, composing diplomatic correspondence in the elaborate, formal language required to speak on behalf of a king. Sometimes the messages are routine, but sometimes they are something else. In the archives of Mari, thousands of tablets have been uncovered, some of them political secrets, coded correspondence, even warnings of invasion. A letter from one governor to another, a coded message from a spy, a request for troops, a list of intercepted envoys. The scribes of Mari were not just record keepers. They were the city's memory, its data center, its diplomatic corps, and its internal clock. They understood the rhythms of tribute, of storage, of taxation and construction. They scheduled harvests and festivals. They tracked the births of royal children, the deaths of foreign kings, and the phases of the moon. Scribes were trained for years. A boy might begin by copying the same symbols again and again into soft clay, memorizing lists, animals, plants, cities, gods. His fingers would ache. His back would bend. But over time, he would gain access to the most valuable tool in the Bronze Age, information. Some scribes worked directly for the king. Others served temples, managing the distribution of offerings, property, and workers. Their handwriting was sometimes beautiful, sometimes hurried, but always purposeful. They knew how to create multiple languages in the same script. They understood protocol, tone, implication. One misplaced symbol could change the meaning of an entire message. So they worked carefully, quietly, and often anonymously. Many of their names are lost, but their work survives tablets, still legible after 3,000 years, pulled from the ruins of palace archives. Their surfaces hardened by the very fires that destroyed the city. Imagine running your fingers across such a tablet today, feeling the marks left by a man in a linen robe, sitting cross-legged in a narrow room, shaping the story of his world with a wedge of reed and a slab of clay. From the silence of their chambers, the scribes of Mari shaped the fates of cities. Now, we leave them to their work and return to a quieter kind of life. One lived not in cities of stone and scribes, but in small fishing villages where the tide ruled the hours and the sea gave and took. Now, let us leave the archives behind. The stone halls of Mari fade into dust, and the soft scratching of stylus on clay gives way to another sound entirely, the rhythmic hush of waves lapping against the shore. You are standing on a narrow beach at the edge of a small fishing village. The air smells of salt and seaweed. The cries of gulls echo overhead. The breeze carries with it the faint scent of smoked fish and damp wood. This is a quiet place. A place where life is lived by the tide, not by the scribal calendar or the king's decree. The village is modest, perhaps a few dozen people in total. The houses are simple, made from sun-baked mud brick or wood, with thatched roofs and low doorways. They're clustered together, just beyond the reach of the highest tide. Life begins early here. Before the sky turns fully blue, the men are already out in boats, simple dugouts, or reed-constructed vessels, pushed out into the calm waters with long poles. They carry baskets, weighted nets, and patience. You imagine yourself in one of these boats. The sun is still low, casting long shadows over the water. You can hear the creak of wood, the gentle slap of water against the hull. The net is lowered slowly, carefully. Your hands know every knot, every flaw in the line. You wait and watch. The sea does not always provide. Some days, the nets come back nearly empty. Others, they return full silver fish wriggling and flashing in the morning light. Back on shore, the work continues. Women sort the catch, gutting fish with sharpened shells or flakes of stone. The meat is rubbed with salt, packed in clay jars, or laid across wooden frames to dry in the sun. Smokehouses burn low fires day and night, preserving the flesh, hardening it for trade or storage. Children help where they can, hauling baskets, gathering driftwood, running messages from shore to hut. Older boys mend nets or learn the balance of the boats. Girls learn the art of preserving, wrapping fish in leaves, packing them with herbs. And in between the chores, the sea is always there. Its rhythm shapes the day. Tides pull back to reveal shallow pools filled with crabs and shellfish. At night, storms may roll in without warning, shaking the fragile huts and soaking everything in their path. Boats must be secured. Fires must be protected. Meals are simple, often shared. Roasted fish, coarse bread, perhaps a few wild greens or pickled roots. Water is drawn from wells. There is little waste, little indulgence, but also little formality. Life is immediate, shaped by weather, by season, and by luck. There is no temple here, no palace. But there are shrines, small stones arranged in circles, smooth pebbles stacked in offering, feathers and shells left by the water's edge. The sea is mysterious, powerful, and sacred. It feeds and it takes. Fishermen pray before casting off. Mothers whisper thanks when their sons return. The people here may never travel far. They may never see the cities or palaces whose bronze tools they sharpen with stones. But they live deeply in the moment, watching the sky, reading the wind, understanding the sea in a way no scroll could teach. And when one of them dies, they are buried not in rich tombs but in the earth behind the huts. A small marker, perhaps a piece of driftwood or a shell. The sea is the last sound they hear. Now, let us leave the salt air behind. Let us rise again, following not the boats, but the sun eastward inland into the dry heart of Mesopotamia, to a different world of control. The sea recedes behind us, and now the earth grows flat, dry, and sun-cracked. You are walking through southern Mesopotamia into one of the world's first true cities. The year might be 2900 BCE, or perhaps a century earlier or later. Time bends here. The mud brick walls have been rebuilt so many times that generations blur together. This is Uruk, a city of canals, ziggurats, and endless grain. As you approach, the sounds shift, not the hush of surf or animal bleating, but the steady rhythm of work. Carts groan under sacks of barley. Wooden paddles stir great vats of fermenting mash. Men shout, oxen grunt, scribes call out quantities to be marked on wet clay. Here, grain is not just food, it is policy, currency, and sacred obligation. You find yourself in the middle of the temple economy, a vast, organized system where the harvest is collected, recorded, stored, and redistributed. Much of this grain is technically offered to the gods, but it's the temple priests and administrators who oversee its use. Imagine yourself not as a priest, nor as a scribe, but as one of the middle-tier workers in this system, a steward of storage, a kind of ancient warehouse manager. Your days begin early. Even before the sun has cleared the walls of the ziggurat, workers are already arriving, delivering loads of grain from nearby fields. The measuring is precise. Baskets are counted, weighed, poured into lined pits or massive clay bins. Each worker's name is known, each delivery logged. You oversee the movement of hundreds of baskets each week. The grain must be kept dry, cool, free from pests. The air inside the storage rooms is heavy, hushed, almost reverent. The scent is earthy dry straw, dust, a faint tang of old barley. Above you, scribes sit with styluses and tablets. Their fingers move quickly, pressing wedge-shaped marks into the soft clay. Weight, source, date, recipient. Some of the grain will be used to bake bread or brew beer for the workers. Some will be stored against drought or flood. Some will be sent to other temples or distributed during festivals. A small portion may be consumed in ritual, a handful burned as smoke to rise toward the heavens, but the vast majority of it, it's part of a system, a mechanism that sustains the city. Grain is paid as wages, given as temple offerings, traded for labor and goods. There is no coined money here, no silver changing hands, just bushels of barley, tallied and trusted. And the job is endless. Mice must be kept at bay. Floodwaters must be watched. Spoilage can wipe out a season's work. It is not glamorous, but it is essential. You rarely leave the temple compound. The great walls rise around you, enclosing not just the grain, but the bureaucratic heart of a civilization. Priests in white robes pass by, their sandals whispering on the polished floor. You nod but do not speak. Your work is quiet. Some days you catch a glimpse of the sacred rituals, statues of gods carried on litters, music from silver pipes, the scent of incense drifting across the courtyard. But mostly you deal in weight and measure, in balance and volume. Still, you know that your hands touch the lifeblood of Uruk. Without this grain, there would be no city, no temples, no trade, just dust. Now, let us leave the storerooms, step back into the light, and turn westward toward a land where stone ruled instead of clay, and where the tombs of kings would rise from sand like mountains. The fields of barley fade behind us, and the land becomes golden once more. Golden not from grain, but from sun-baked desert and the shimmering limestone that lines the banks of the Nile. We are in Egypt, now Old Kingdom Egypt, around 2500 BCE. Here, the river is life, and death is a continuation, not an end, but a journey to another realm. And the tombs are gateways. But these monuments, which rise from the earth in stark, geometric beauty, did not build themselves. Each began not with the vision of a pharaoh, but with a workforce thousands of men, clay brick tools, and an astonishing sense of order. Imagine yourself not as a noble or priest, but as one of the thousands employed seasonally to help construct a tomb. Not a pyramid, perhaps, but a mastaba, the flat-roofed, rectangular tombs of elite officials and wealthy families. You are called from your village after the harvest is done. The Nile has flooded, covering your fields in nutrient-rich silt, and for a few months there is little to farm. So, like many others, you travel north to the site near the necropolis, a city of the dead that bustles like one of the living. The desert is bright and blinding. The tools are simple: stone hammers, copper chisels, sledges, and ropes. You work in crews, organized by function stone cutters, haulers, plasterers, carvers. Each day begins with shouted names, tallied rations, and a bowl of porridge. The limestone is heavy. You work in teams to haul blocks on wooden sledges, pouring water on the sand to reduce friction. It's slow, methodical, relentless. The sound of work fills the air, scraping, thudding, murmured chants to keep rhythm. You eat with the others in communal huts. Bread, onions, beer. Maybe dried fish if you're lucky. The days are hot, but the evenings grow cool. Fires are lit, and stories shared. Not just about the work, but about the dead. The importance of proper burial, of pleasing the gods, of crossing safely into the next world. Sometimes you pause to watch the sculptors. They're skilled, precise, chiseling out hieroglyphs or painting scenes of daily life. The deceased hunting birds, plowing fields, receiving offerings. These are not decorative. They are instructions, assurances, magical provisions for eternity. The tomb you help build is more than a structure. It's a vessel, a bridge between this world and the next. Inside, shafts are cut deep into the earth. A burial chamber lies at the bottom, carefully sealed. Above, offering chapels are stocked with painted jars, statues, and false doors through which the spirit might pass. You may never see the completed tomb. Your work is seasonal, temporary, but when you return to your village, you carry with you the knowledge that your hand shaped stone that will outlast you and your grandchildren, and the kingdom itself. The elite for whom you built the tomb will rest beneath your work for eternity, surrounded by the echoes of your labor, your breath, your rhythm. And now, we step away from the desert sun, into a cooler, quieter place, an island of mystery where old bronze was hoarded, traded, and buried beneath the stones. Thousands of years ago, people across the ancient world prized bronze above all other metals. Its strength and versatility made it essential for tools, weapons, and art. But as quickly as it rose to prominence, bronze disappeared from view, lost to the sands of time until archaeologists uncovered its secrets in the 20th century. Today, we can trace the origins of bronze back to the ancient Egyptians, the cradle of civilization where the first humans settled along the banks of the Nile River. Here, around 3100 BC, the ancient Egyptians developed agriculture, writing, and the tools and technology to shape their world. Among their greatest innovations was the discovery of how to combine tin and copper to create bronze, an alloy stronger and more durable than either metal on its own. Forged in clay furnaces heated by wood and charcoal, bronze became the metal of choice for everything from the sharpest arrowheads to the largest ceremonial axes. But as the Egyptian Empire grew and fell, bronze continued to hold value, pride. Now we leave the Nile behind. We cross the Mediterranean, past rocky islands and rolling waves to the lush, olive-covered hills of ancient Crete. The air here is soft and fragrant, full of thyme, wildflowers, and salt from the nearby sea. This is Malia, one of the early palace centers of Minoan civilization. But our focus is not on kings or rituals today. It is on something quietly mysterious. The hoard's ancient collections of bronze tools and weapons, buried carefully in hidden corners of the palace or beneath stones in open courtyards. Why were they buried? Why hidden? The truth, even now, is only partly known. But these caches speak to something deeply human: fear, transition, or perhaps the quiet rituals of a collapsing world. Imagine yourself as a palace servant or smith. It is late in the Bronze Age, and the world is not as stable as it once was. Earthquakes have shaken the land. Foreign traders speak of wars on the mainland. Drought, too, is whispered about. Something is changing. And so, someone, maybe you, maybe another, begins to gather objects. Not coins, for there is no currency, but bronze tools, axes, chisels, blades, some still sharp, others worn from long use. A few may have ceremonial designs, a spiral, a double axe, a dot that marks it as sacred. You place them in jars or lay them flat in the earth. You cover them with stone. You do not record where. You do not speak of it to others. This is not burial for the dead. It is burial for the uncertain. Perhaps you believed you'd return, that the danger would pass, or that the items would be safer in the ground than in plain sight. Perhaps it was an offering, a plea to the gods beneath the soil. Many of these hoards were never recovered. They were found millennia later unearthed not by their owners, but by modern archaeologists, brushing away centuries of dust and root. And always the same questions arise. Why were they buried? Why were they left? The tools themselves are simple, modest, no gold, no precious stones. Yet the act of burying them, of hiding wealth not in vaults, but in earth, suggests anxiety. A culture under pressure, or perhaps one with a different sense of value altogether. In the wider Minoan world, there is a growing sense of unease during this period. Palaces burn, trade routes shift, languages change. Linear A becomes linear B. Some hordes may mark this shift and attempt to preserve continuity in the face of collapse. And so the buried bronze lies still, waiting, until centuries later, a workman's shovel strikes metal. A dull, forgotten axe sees sunlight again. And in that moment, the echoes of the Bronze Age return mute, but not meaningless. Now, from these mysterious hordes, let us journey back to the centers of control where empires once measured everything, including the people themselves. We turn now to Hattusa, capital of the Hittite world. We are moving east, away from the Atlantic, from the lands of the Mycenaeans, from the shores where the great seafarers sailed. For the empires of the late Bronze Age were vast and many, and our journey among them has been long. But at the very heart of the Near East, tucked amid mountains and wheat fields, was one of the last great urban centers to bloom. Tal el Amarna, a city of palaces and temples, home to Ikhnatun, Nefertiti, and the heretic priests who served a sun god, Aten, alone. There are few sites like it, which captures the world of the Bronze Age so completely. But just as we explored the wonders of the great city itself, now we must peer into the lives of its common folk. For if the pharaoh was sun god, then ordinary folk were his servants, artisans, farmers, laborers. Each day, as at countless other centers of the Bronze Age, they woke to tasks as old as civilization itself. Some worked in workshops, shaping copper or wood or stone. Some toiled in fields of barley, flax, or grapes. Some hauled baskets or wheeled carts, laden with figs, fish, and fresh bread. What was life like in this bustling city? What did it mean to live within the shadow of such power? Let us see. It's morning in the town of Tel El Marna. The day begins with a splash of water from a clay jug, a scrape of the walking stick, sandals. The sea breeze fades now. We journey inland once more to the dry heart of Anatolia. Here, high on a rocky plateau, stand the walls of Hattusa, the great capital of the Hittite Empire. Massive stone gates arch overhead. Lions are carved into their frames. The roads are steep, the air thin and dry. But within these walls, life unfolds in quiet, orderly rhythm. You are not a scribe here, nor a king. You are one of the many who live within the palace complex, a sprawling maze of corridors, kitchens, storerooms, and courtyards. A servant, perhaps, or a stable hand, or the child of an official, learning the rules of this rigid, powerful world. It is early morning. The sun rises over the highlands, casting golden light over stone walls that have already stood for centuries. You wake in a narrow room, cool, dry, bare. Perhaps you sleep on a simple mat, with a carved amulet tucked beneath your pillow for protection. Outside, the palace stirs. There is no single room of rule, no throne that governs all. Instead, power here is distributed between scribes, stewards, priests, generals, and the king himself. Dozens of small offices handle grain allotments, livestock management, military correspondence. Orders arrive from the top, but it is the palace machine that makes the empire work. You make your way through the complex. Along one corridor, scribes are already at work copying treaties onto clay tablets. The Hittites were masters of diplomacy. Their language was stiff, formal, legalistic. You hear the soft scrape of stylus on clay and the quiet murmur of dictated words. Somewhere, a clerk reads aloud the terms of a grain treaty with Egypt. Further along, the temple cooks begin their day. You smell lentils boiling in bronze pots. Flatbreads are laid across hot stones. Offerings are prepared carefully measured bowls of flour, honey, and wine to be carried to the gods before the morning rituals begin. You pass storage rooms stacked with amphorae, jars sealed with wax, tablets hanging by twine to record their contents. The logistics are staggering. This palace is not just a home for the royal family, it's a bureaucratic engine. You might stop to speak with a stable hand tending the king's chariots. The Hittites were chariot specialists, and the horses are valuable, well-trained, sleek. Their hooves are cleaned, their manes braided. Their names are recorded in clay tablets with lineage and temperament. And yet, despite all the movement, the palace is quiet. There are no shouting guards, no loud proclamations. Orders are issued softly, through written message or private discussion. The palace's power is absolute, but it does not roar. It hums. In a courtyard, you glimpse the king himself. He is not draped in gold. He wears a simple wool robe, embroidered with signs of status. He walks with priests and advisors, inspecting offerings for the temple of the storm god. His face is unreadable. The palace is full of order, but also of fear. Rules govern everything: ritual, hierarchy, conduct. You do not step out of line. You do not speak when not spoken to. The archives hold tablets recording offenses and punishments. Everything must be recorded, known, controlled. And yet, in the evening, when the work is done, the palace softens. A flute echoes down the corridors. A servant places a bowl of figs on a wooden tray. Lamps flicker in the windows. The stone walls hold the warmth of the day, and the silence of the highland air settles over Hattusa like a blanket. You lie down, listening to the hush of wind over stone, and dream not of conquest or control, but of simpler things: a quiet field, a family's fire, the sound of sandals on Now, let the palace fade. Let the temples crumble. Let the torches burn low across every kingdom we have visited. Because the Bronze Age is ending. And unlike many chapters in history, this one does not close with a single event. There is no one war, no single catastrophe, no final ruler whose fall ends the story. Instead, there is a slow unraveling, a long dusk that settles over the ancient world, quiet but devastating. Historians still debate the cause. Perhaps it was climate. Perhaps it was war. Perhaps it was migration, or trade collapse, or plague. Or perhaps it was all of them, happening not at once, but in echo and chain. What we know is this: around 1200 BCE, the interconnected kingdoms of the Bronze Age Egypt, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, the cities of the Levant and Anatolia began to fall, one by one, sometimes suddenly, sometimes in silence. Imagine, if you will, a trader. He is traveling a road he has known for decades, leading his donkey through familiar valleys. But the towns he passes are quiet. The gates are shut. The markets are empty. No goods to trade, no scribes at their tablets, only silence. Or imagine a palace steward in Ugarit, in modern-day Syria, waking to smoke on the horizon. He sends a message to his allies. The enemy is near. The city is in flames. The gods have turned their faces away. That message, written on clay, is found centuries later never delivered. These were not just military losses. They were systemic failures. The trade routes collapsed. Bronze could no longer be made in large quantities. Grain could not be moved to where it was needed. Cities burned. Palaces fell. Writing disappeared from entire regions. In the Aegean, the Mycenaean palaces, once powerful, intricate, rich with tablets and tribute, fell silent. The linear B script disappeared for centuries. Literacy was lost. The age of kings gave way to village life, and memory turned to myth. In Hattusa, the stone city we just walked through, nothing remained but toppled gates and scorched archives. And yet, not everything vanished. Some people survived. They rebuilt. They tilled smaller fields, crafted simpler tools, told older stories by firelight. A sword once fit for a palace became a farming blade. A god once honored in gold was remembered with bread. And, over time, new cultures rose. New languages, new gods, new forms of writing. The Iron Age began, but it began in the shadow of a world forgotten. To us, the end seems sudden, but for those living it, it was likely gradual. A missed caravan here, a poor harvest there, a shrine left uncleaned, a rumor of war. And then one day, the city is gone. And so ends the Bronze Age, not with finality, but with forgetting. The world we've walked through, with its grain stewards and fish dryers, its scribes and tin merchants, its tombs and hoards and temples, it faded into the soil, until the wind blew the dust aside, and the past whispered again. For millennia, people looked up at the sky and tried to make sense of the dark stains drifting across it. At times, they saw monsters, at others, divine wrath. But over time, they found something else. In the shifting shapes of smoke and cloud, they saw stories, tales as old as humanity itself, tales that transfixed and terrified and thrilled, stories that echoed the triumphs and tragedies of human experience, tales that reminded them they were not alone. And now, after a decade exploring our world's deep past, we turn our gaze toward the heavens to tell you goodbye. This is our final episode. It's been an incredible 10 years. We started the channel back in 2012, and since then we've taken you back to the beginnings of agriculture, followed ancient trade routes, discovered the secrets of Egyptian tombs, traced the rise